Welcome in to another edition of New Track Record. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Mr. Hatch.
How we doing?
Good. Are you ready to go north of the border this week?
Yes, north of the border and Peacock only this weekend. Something everyone's looking forward to.
The excitement of Peacock only races.
Everyone is thrilled for the Peacock only weekend. We have plenty to dive into. Of course, we'll preview the Honda Indy Toronto coming up this weekend at Exhibition Place on the streets of Toronto. Plus, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum set to undergo a massive, major overhaul that's been, well, I'd say badly needed for years, but this is a very exciting project. We'll get to that. Plus, some silly season news, a potential new team that could join the sport. So plenty to dive into. Plus, we'll start with Alex Palou because there is some interesting movement in F1 this week that absolutely has an impact on Palou and his future as far as trying to get to F1. So it came down that Nyck De Vries is out at Alpha Tauri and Daniel Ricciardo is in for the rest of the season. Now, Ricciardo's been a reserve guy for Red Bull for this season. Obviously, his show on ESPN here in the U.S. as far as kind of like a Peyton Manning brothers like show, but for F1 races is on hold. But the next one isn't until COTA, so they can at least put together a plan. But he is in. He'll have an opportunity to prove himself against Yuki Tsunoda in the Alpha Tauri seat. Look, let's be honest. First off, that is not a good ride right now.
Not at all. I mean, it's the team that's in 10th in the constructor standings. They're terrible. And Nyck De Vries just wasn't getting it done even by Alpha Tauri standards, but what does that do for that seat for next year? Because that was discussed as maybe one of the open seats for Alex Palou. So is Daniel Ricciardo a long-term Alpha Tauri driver? Is it just for the remainder of the season? Who's to know at this point?
And you look at it, Ricciardo against Tsunoda, it will be interesting to see how they stack up versus each other this season. I don't believe Daniel Ricciardo is a long-term option, though, at Alpha Tauri or whatever they're going to be called next year because they're rebranding the name again for next season.
Yeah, who knows for sure? I mean, you're convinced that Sergio Perez will be out, so could Daniel Ricciardo step into that spot? Could it be somebody else? Not sure, but it muddies the waters for Alex Palou. It doesn't eliminate the possibility, but it's interesting as we're getting now into the thick of the F1 silly season now where they don't wait till the end of the season to make moves. They now have Nyck De Vries had all of 10 races with Alpha Tauri before it was determined, nope, not good enough.
Yeah, I would say I'm not that shocked just because that's how they do it with driver. They make it before you'd expect every time when it comes to Red Bull and Alpha Tauri and the way they make it work. So this is a fascinating move. We'll see. And the impact on Palou, obviously, what does it mean in the short term? Not a whole lot. Alex Palou, still the reserve driver, will be joining McLaren at the end of the year for the remaining Formula One races after the IndyCar season. That from Zach Brown. Now, Joe Saward in his green notebook, who covers F1, I think where this all kind of started up. The word is that Dr. Helmut Marko, who's in charge of those decisions with Alpha Tauri, likes the look of the Spaniard Alex Palou and might offer him a seat at Alpha Tauri when the IndyCar season ends in September. You got to remember it's tricky as far as Palou's contract and how things play out, but that clause, which is end of July, right before the summer break, as far as negotiating window, as far as the F1 deal, puts them in an impossible spot because teams have a race weekend, then they'll be on break, and Palou probably won't be able to get out of anything up until after the IndyCar season to begin with.
I think there's a way to figure it out if they need to. Alex Palou is the most coveted free agent in the IndyCar paddock. Everybody presumes he's going to Arrow McLaren. And that will probably be the play if Formula One doesn't come about. But McLaren has the option to wait because let's say this, if Alex Palou eventually signs with McLaren, then Felix Rosenqvist is effectively out. If he doesn't, then Felix Rosenqvist is back. And Felix Rosenqvist is probably going to wait to see if that's an option as well. So, and also if there would be conversations, it wouldn't wait until September for Alpha Tauri or Helmut Marko, whoever, to reach out to Alex Palou and at least start gauging interest and see if it's a possibility. They can have a handshake agreement in August and say, we'll sign this at the end of September. So I don't know if the timeline affects it very much. It may back up silly season for IndyCar, but Alex Palou has his sights set on Formula One, and he's going to give that every and any option he possibly can to potentially make it there.
And you would have to think, with the way things are going for Sergio Perez at Red Bull, that an obvious move would be Daniel Ricciardo, if he shows well the second half of the F1 season, has an opportunity to move back into a Red Bull seat and be the number 2 to Max Verstappen as the clear number 1.
It's just weird that, is Daniel Ricciardo the best you can do? I know he's a popular driver, but
he's not going to be competing for wins.
And maybe that's the reason why they want him. Maybe that's why Max would want him.
Sergio was close, and then he's just completely fallen off a cliff in qualifying in recent races. So
I don't know what they want with that second car. Max probably just wants somebody that's going to run second to him every race. Daniel Ricciardo, I feel like maybe has more to give. So I don't know. There's overtures, talks about Sean Leclerc and Lando Norris. Does their contractual obligations look like? Is there some sort of clause to get them out of it? There's a lot to determine in Formula One, and for once, it directly impacts the silly season in IndyCar with Alex Palou.
So we'll see how this plays out, but I would say, if anything, this helps Alex Palou's chances.
I would agree, because there was discussion about Nyck De Vries. Does he get a second year and to try to prove himself with Alpha Tauri? And there were people that thought, yeah, he'll get a second year. But no, he didn't even get half a year with Alpha Tauri.
And I think that's, if you're Alex Palou, you have to think that you're that much closer to having an opportunity if the things move the way they do. Look, I don't think Daniel Ricciardo is going to be at Alpha Tauri next year. I'd be very surprised.
With that said, I know the goal is to get into Formula One, but man, that's a tough seat right now in terms of competition in Formula One.
And it's funny, you go back, Sebastian Bourdais, this is essentially the same seat he was in, 15 years ago?
Right.
And he lasted a year and a half, basically.
Yeah. But Alex Palou has a sight set on. I don't think it matters the seat and how competitive or uncompetitive it is. I think that's Alex Palou's goal, is to get there and then make the best of it once you do get there. And if it's an Alpha Tauri seat, then so be it.
So that's the latest on Palou, F1, and obviously that will continue to play out and continue to have an impact on IndyCar. Meanwhile, in IndyCar, a new driver this weekend, Tom Blomqvist making his IndyCar debut. Simon Pagenaud is still out after undergoing further medical evaluations. Still recovered, not cleared to race. Says he feels good, just not enough time to recover, and reports out there that his concussion-like symptoms is preventing him from participating this weekend. And after the crash that he had, I mean, it's not a surprise. You just wonder, will he return to the car this season? I think he will, but there's at least a hint of doubt. So best of luck to Simon in his recovery, first off.
Yeah, just probably one hell of a concussion probably for Simon Pagenaud, and that's why he's still not cleared. But Tom Blomqvist gets the start, and a guy that a lot of people have considered the front runner for one of those two seats in Meyer Shank to open up. This is a good introductory type venture for Blomqvist and the team, as in all likelihood these two entities are together in a full-time capacity next year. Blomqvist, of course, been with competing in IMSA and WEC as well. Did a couple years of Formula E back in the day. So he has some open wheel experience, albeit electric cars. So he's not totally foreign to him, but we'll see how it goes this weekend for a guy that is up there in age. He'll turn 30 later this year, but a guy that seems to be on the short track to full-time IndyCar competition, and this will be a good introduction for him at Toronto.
At least for him, he has an IndyCar test day at Sebring. So that's like the comparison as far as a street circuit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is going to be really tough. And he knows that, right? This is a tough debut. Limited testing.
Low expectations.
Street circuit. Very, very tough. If he can qualify, better than last, I think I'll be impressed.
It's all about learning.
Barring crashes and things like that.
All about learning and bringing the car home in one piece, I think would be the goal for Tom Blomqvist this weekend. So the thing is, though, it's not like the expectations have been through the roof for that car anyway. So for Blomqvist, hitting the ground running, at least now you won't be going into St. Pete next year as your first IndyCar race. You'll kind of have shaken those nerves off and gotten introduced a little bit this weekend. We'll see how it goes. He's got potential. And that's why Meyer Shank has eyed him for a 2024 seat. He'll have his first opportunity to showcase that potential this weekend.
Meanwhile, some other silly season notes to get to. This is not a surprise. Devlin DeFrancesco will not be back with Andretti Autosport next year. We kind of saw this coming, right? And Andretti says they're going to look on restructuring their IndyCar program for 2024. Marshall Pruitt reporting that they want to go after drivers and hiring drivers and no paid drivers as far as the makeup, which is a shift because that's what they've done for several years now. I mean, you go back to 2017 is the last time they just hired 4 guys because you had Zach Veach, you had James Hinchcliffe for a year, you've had Devlin DeFrancesco. So you're going back several seasons with their driver lineup. And that year it was Sato, so you could even argue that.
Yeah, at least it
Marco,
had some
RHR, and Rossi. So, and then in 16, Munoz, Marco, Hunter Ray, and Rossi. So I guess technically the last year they truly had 4 seats.
I think when you look at business-wise for Andretti, they're in a good enough spot that they have enough sponsors in-house to not have to take a significant amount of money to run a car. And that's a good place to be. And it can help you competitively, and it doesn't handcuff you into maybe signing somebody that you otherwise wouldn't because they bring money. And that can help your entire organization. So it's good to see financially Andretti in a spot where they can kind of get rid of that. You wish teams like maybe Chip Ganassi Racing would figure that out too.
Right? You know what's funny? Andretti always gets a lot of flack for having the ride buyer, so to speak, in the 4th car. But I feel like Chip Ganassi Racing, they get a pass.
Right.
And they have essentially like 1.5, ride buyers. The Palou seat and the Dixon seat are fully paid for. Ericsson, at the beginning, yes, he was a ride buyer, but on talent, he's clearly not. And he's made that very clear. In fact, Marcus Ericsson, a possibility for Andretti's number 29 car, mentioned by Marshall Pruitt of Racer.com. Obviously, plenty of other drivers to consider. Colton Herta, Kyle Kirkwood, locked in on multi-year deals. Romain Grosjean, he's got to perform the second half of the season to be able to retain that seat.
I think even with conversations now talking about who's in those seats and Grosjean a question now. So you better get it in gear second half of the year.
So I would think that would be a landing spot for Ericsson, Felix Rosenqvist. If he's not back with McLaren, that's a possibility as well. Do they go after David Malukas? He is a guy who is an interesting candidate for any of these seats because, yes, he brings a lot of money, but also he's not viewed as a guy who's just bringing a check.
Yeah.
It's kind of in between.
For me, is David Malukas really a serious upgrade at driver? I know he's better than Devlin DeFrancesco. I just don't look at David Malukas, and maybe I'll end up being turned wrong. Lord knows it happens a lot. Is a guy that is really going to be buoyed by going to a better team? Is he a dude that, okay, he's done what he can with a lesser team, but he deserves a better team? I just don't know if I sit there with David Malukas. Or is it driven by financials with HMD?
Like could he end up at say, Ray Hall, or, because we think Jack Harvey is going to be out of a seat there.
Right. Maybe that's a natural progression for him as opposed to going to Andretti.
I don't know. It seems like an interesting question mark as far as he's another guy that we know is going to be on the move.
I would say Callum Ilott would be more coveted by Andretti than David Malukas.
I would think, but that's interesting. Is Malukas go to Ganassi simply because he does bring the funding and would put you in a competitive spot. To replace, say Marcus Ericsson is gone, and then whatever they do with that fourth car, if it is indeed Kevin Simpson. Marcus Armstrong also looking for a ride for next year. He's been in contact with several teams from Marshall Pruitt as well. And that's another one where, you hope he gets hired because he's not a guy who's bringing a big budget. In fact, he's not really bringing anything. He wants to continue with Chip Ganassi Racing, but he's unsigned beyond this year.
Yeah, so a lot's going to go into who's bringing money, who's not bringing money, who has to bring money, who doesn't have to bring money. Andretti, at least, is in a position where they're financially in a spot where no one has to necessarily bring money. It's nice, but they can actually have 4 paid drivers for the first time in quite some time.
So a lot of things at play, and again, a lot of this depends on what Alex Palou does. I think he and Marcus Ericsson are 1A and 1B.
Well, not necessarily Alex Palou. He's either going to McLaren or he's going to be in Formula One. He's not going anywhere else.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's the domino, I guess. Now, I guess it holds up the Felix Rosenqvist element of it because he could just go back to McLaren if it doesn't work out for Alex Palou there. But I don't know if Alex Palou's the catalyst because he's going to be at either one team or not in the sport.
True, so it's limiting his options. But I do think what both those drivers do, that sets the tone for silly season. And until we have movement with one of those two, I don't think it necessarily has to be both, but I think one of those two will have a delay.
Yeah, I think Felix Rosenqvist is kind of the trigger because although he has to wait for Alex Palou, so I guess, it kind of does tie into Palou, but where Felix goes.
Meanwhile, Devlin DeFrancesco, again, who's going to be out of an Andretti Autosport seat, still looking to continue an IndyCar, and I'm sure he will have suitors. Look, he brings a sizable budget. You've seen a little bit of improvement. He is coming off, I think, his best finish of the season, a 12th at Mid-Ohio a couple weeks ago. So is he a guy who is a candidate for a coin seat, for example?
Well, Coyne could be looking for 1 or 2 new drivers, and if you bring money, he likes you. So
yeah,
could be an opportunity there.
We were talking the other day about, teams and who's on the shakiest ground between Coyne, Foyt, and Eddie Carpenter Racing.
Yes.
And, I would go with Coyne because you're going to see perhaps a complete turnover again and a team that went from having, a veteran driver for a long time. And then now this year you have 2 really young guys, a rookie and then a second-year guy, and then they've taken a clear step back.
Yeah, I think when we look at, we'll get to it a little bit later in the podcast about additional teams joining the series and already having 27 cars, is at some point either teams are going to start downsizing cars or there's teams that are going to go away. And so for Coyne, it's very much a shoestring operation and you need money. And the good thing is, I guess there's always at least a couple drivers out there that bring money. Unfortunately, it doesn't always match up with talent. And that's, I think, something that Coyne continues to fight to a certain extent. Foyt, although they've got an infusion of cash, which has helped, is you're taking flyers on guys not because of race acumen, but because they're bringing money. And I don't think that's a pathway to success, consistent success. I have
to correct myself. So Devlin DeFrancesco, 3rd best finish of the season at Mid-Ohio. He was 12th at Detroit, 13th. In the Indy 500. How did I miss it? He was 13th in the Indy 500. That's surprising, but no top 10s. A good guy who's 21st in points, tied with Elio Castroneves. So obviously trying to hold on to that leader circle money for the Andretti team.
Trying to hold on. We'll see if he can do it.
And you talk about David Malukas. He is 19th or worse for a half dozen races and then a 6th at Mid-Ohio. So it was a huge bounce back for him. second half of the season is kind of going to determine how he fares as far as what team he ends up with next year.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting to watch. But Devlin DeFrancesco, if he does land another ride, isn't it going to be because of his racing acumen? It's going to be because he brings money.
And I think, again, like I said, I'd be very surprised if he's not on the grid next year.
Really?
Yes.
Guess we'll see.
We shall see. But Racer reporting at least 3 teams expressed an interest in DeFrancesco for 2024. So what would those 3 teams be? I think Coin would be one, right?
Correct.
Ed Carpenter Racing? Maybe another?
Probably. Yeah, I don't think Ryan Hunter-Reay is a long-term solution there.
And then after that, Juncos?
Yeah, is Callum Ilott on the move? Probably. So yeah, I would agree there.
Those are the teams I'd be surprised. I mean, obviously he's not going to return to Andretti. Penske's full. Ganassi, is Ganassi an option? I mean, seriously.
It's going to have at least one spot open, maybe 2.
McLaren's going to be full. Ray Hall, I'd be surprised. And then I guess Meyer Shank could maybe be an option.
Yeah.
It just depends on, where their funding stands for 2024. But I would be surprised if you're going to bring in Blomqvist. I think you want someone who's very experienced to pair with him.
I mean, would you be surprised if Ryan Hunter-Reay's at Meyer Shank next year?
That's an interesting possibility. I mean, you're looking at a veteran driver, but again, does that really...
I think if you're going to pair somebody that's completely inexperienced in Tom Blomqvist, you need an experienced person with them.
But then with that argument, like, yes, we expect Elio to be Indy 500 only, but then
right.
do you just keep Simon and
I don't know. Right now, is Ryan Hunter-Reay a better driver than Simon Pagenaud? I think that's open to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing. You know what you're getting with Simon. Maybe you don't really know what you get with RHR over the course of a season. So I don't know. Maybe you hold on to Simon. I don't think Simon's the worst thing out there. I think the majority of the issues for Meyer Shank are outside the cockpit. The majority. Now, they don't put themselves in the best positions either. I think there's some blame for the drivers, but I think this is a situation where you're looking at the entire team and not just
where you're
drivers.
Looking at personnel and maybe need to shuffle crew and engineers and things like that in management.
Right. I think of the two, I think Elio is clearly past his prime for a season, but I don't know if Simon Pagenaud necessarily is.
Pagenaud so far in the season, 25th in points. Obviously did miss the Mid-Ohio race. Will miss Toronto this weekend. Best finish of 13th on the year. And, talking about new teams entering the fold. And this one, I think, kind of came out of left field for me, but it makes sense. And that is Pratt Miller Engineering, interested in putting together an IndyCar team. So they have some connections to Open Wheel. So they're based in Michigan. They've run the factory Corvette program since its inception in the late 90s. And this from Marshall Pruitt. They're working on the business and technical side. They even helped with the aero kit designs for Chevy in that era. So they've been involved since GM returned to Open Wheel in 2012.
I don't understand the entire connection with so they were joined at the hip with Chevy with their Corvette program, and now they're not. So they're kind of more independent than they used to be.
Yes.
So that kind of opens up opportunities for Pratt Miller, and sounds like eyeing maybe 25 or 26 to join the series.
Yes. They want to be a full-time entrant in 25 or 26. Obviously that will be with new regulations. So, I mean, ideally you sign up next year with the hybrids, but that's a quick timeline.
Yeah,
so I understand. But I mean, here's the thing. If you're going to join the series, you need to have, if you're going to be serious about it, you need to either do the methodical approach like Shank did, or start right out with 2 full-time entries.
Yeah, I think this is it's a power team in motorsports, so it's not a startup. It's not trying to find its way. It'll be finding its way in open wheel, but this is an established team in motorsport, which I think helps. But what do you do? Do you look at 25 and say maybe we're going to do 4 to 6 races and then jump in the deep end in 26, or do you jump in right away with a full season and say 25? So I think those are good questions, but I think you feel like Pratt Miller ahead of the curve, so to speak, in that it's not a operation that's just finding its footing, or IndyCar is going to be the biggest thing it's competed in. Like, it's competed in a lot of things and it's been around for a long time. It's a professional organization, all that good stuff. So maybe they're more successful out of the gate than maybe some other teams.
Well, and you look at the grid. I mean, you have 27 full-time cars. Could we see 28 next year? Another team interested in joining. What does this mean as far as, like, at some point you're maxed out, right?
I think that's a discussion we had. Like, HMD isn't going to do anything for next year. Does it do anything for 25? You're at 27 cars. When is too many?
And I think you're approaching that when you get closer to 30.
Yeah, it's just, how many is too many? And does that then mean we see cars or teams downsize a little bit? Or do we see teams go away? I don't know. But when you inch towards 30, you're in the realm of too many cars. I know people out there will say, well, who's to say what's too many cars? I'm saying in terms of grids, in terms of, garage space and all that stuff at some places, in terms of just cars on track. Look how difficult it is with 27 cars at some of these tracks during qualifying.
Well, that's something they've talked about for Toronto and Mid-Ohio, going into the season now. They made it work for Mid-Ohio. They're going to make it work for Toronto, but that was an off-season topic last off-season.
Yeah, and so especially places like Toronto where you don't have much room to expand. And then you look at these street courses and road courses and everybody's constantly complaining about space on track. At some point, if you do continue to add cars, you need to shake up the qualifying format, because if you're going to dictate it by fastest laps, you need to be able to allow these drivers to find clean laps, clean space on track. Even when you split it into 2, do you have to start splitting it into 3 groups to start off? Who knows? But I think logistically, it just creates more and more problems. As much as some people love to see bigger and bigger and bigger grids, I'm great for anything in the 20s, mid 20s is, I think, perfect. I think 25, 26 cars is more than enough. But you inch closer to 30, there's too many cars.
And unless we're talking about 30 cars at Michigan or Pocono,
right,
like on a big oval.
Yeah, Texas,
or even
it
Texas,
works fine.
That's fine. But beyond that, it's really difficult.
Just the racing, I think hurts the more you add. If something happens in the midfield on lap 1 of a street course or a road course, when you have 23 cars, it doesn't take as many out as you would 30 cars. And I think logistically is a big problem. And I also think competitiveness too, and leader circle too. If that's not going to expand, because what does it cover? The top 22, 23?
Top 20, I believe.
Top 20?
And it's just under $1 million. It used to be 1.2, and now we're at like 910,000. And I get it. The series commercially is in a lot better spot, especially compared to 2020, obviously. But even compared to 2019. Yeah.
So when you look at that, it's a big deal. So overall, I think there's a lot of different issues with increased car counts. There's bigger problems, but this used to be a problem for not enough cars. Now I think we're reaching a point where potentially there's too many cars, and that's just how it is. And I think I'm surprised that the leader circle hasn't expanded already, at least to cover more cars.
Do you go back up to say 22 and make that so you're tight? So
I would go to 25.
Okay. It is 22. So my apologies.
Okay.
It is 22, but do you go, up to 24? And I know they took some of the money from that, from the leader circle for marketing, and we've seen some improvement there. But it's at some point you have to give the entries battling for that top 22. Because remember, the fourth Ganassi can't get a spot. The fourth Andretti was grandfathered in,
right?
But teams adding fourth entries aren't eligible. So, I mean, at some point you got to find a way to give more incentive, and it's really tight for that top 22. I mean, you look at teams outside of it. I mean, Coyne's outside of it with the 51, the 55 of Foyt's outside of it. The number 30 Ray Hall with Jack Harvey's out of it. Augustine Canapino's 24th. The 78 car, the 60 is out of it. And then Devlin DeFrancesco, the 29 entry for Andretti, is in 22nd. And there's a 6-point difference between 22nd and 23rd. So it's very tight.
And traditionally, those are the teams and the efforts that need the extra income. And so, look, if you're going to subsidize the series, you need to subsidize it, maybe not fully, but the majority of it. And unfortunately, some teams that need it are being left out. I'm surprised it hasn't increased from 22.
Always easy for us to say how other people should spend their money. Yeah,
it's so easy to say how people should spend their money. It's easy for us to say.
All right, so that's a look at some of the silly season movement and notes. And then we shift to Toronto. And before we get into previewing the race, this is an event, IndyCar Deep Throat telling me that they're having massive ticket sales for this. There's a lot of buzz, and not just people coming from Canada, but people coming from the U.S. to this event. And then Marshall Pruitt basically confirming that on Racer.com as far as this event. They're looking at an extension, trying to extend it out, and that perhaps could be announced this season as far as Toronto and a long-term extension. So Green Savory Race Promotions, which promotes Toronto, Portland. They own Mid-Ohio, and then they also promote St. Pete. So one of the major promoters in the series, trying to work on an extension. Ticket sales are strong. Should be their biggest crowd in quite some time. Ticket sales up over last year, and last year had a big crowd as well.
Yeah, it was a record crowd last year, and so great to see, because Toronto, when we looked at it and there was issues around Exhibition Place, and they continue construction all around that, and infrastructure-wise, does the race still fit and all that stuff, and they've made it work, and Green Savory have done a great job figuring all that stuff out. Fans have come out. It's a real treat to go up to Canada once a year. You wish they could go twice, but the fans have turned out, and it's a still popular event. They've figured out how to run it with 27 cars, and who knows if they can figure out how to run it with 29 or something in a couple years, but it's great to see, particularly when we look at that race as, oh man, it's a peacock race. It's kind of a throwaway race, but it's anything but north of the border.
All right, so taking a look at some changes on the spotter guide this weekend, and I think the biggest change, Alex Palou, new sponsor, the number 10 Journey Rewards, and that's Journey Journie, and it's basically a gas station rewards program for Chevron in British Columbia and Alberta, Ultramar, Fast Gas, Pioneer, and On the Run. So basically for Canadian people understand what that's all about. So that's new. Also, Newgarden in the Snap-on car, McLaughlin in the Gallagher car. Other changes, Rosenquist in the Smart Stop self-storage car. We'll have Marcus Armstrong back in the green Ridgeline car. Let's see other changes here. We have Devlin DeFrancesco in the BitBuy car, Jack Harvey in the Hub Insurance car, Christian Lundgaard back with the green and black, the Vivid Clear RX machine. And that does it for the changes. Taking a look at the weekend schedule. So practice session 1, these are all times Eastern. Again, Peacock IndyCar Live for international who don't have access to a streaming platform. Sirius XM and IndyCar Radio, 3 to 4:15 Eastern, Friday afternoon. Practice 2 on Saturday, 10:35 to 11:35 a.m. Eastern. Qualifying 2:50 to 4:20 in the afternoon that Saturday. And then the warm-up 10:15 to 10:45 in the morning Sunday. And then the race coverage on Peacock, 1:30 to 4 Eastern. Again, only on Peacock. No USA, no NBC. You can do the free trial, I believe. Limited commercial interruption. If you need a subscription, they had a deal. I have it for like 99 cents a month for a year.
Just pay the money and watch the race.
For $5, you can watch every session of the weekend. And believe me, the Peacock maybe 2 years ago didn't have as much to watch as far as content wise. They've improved that quite a bit. And just think,
absolutely.
Come here in the U.S. in the fall with Big Ten football, then Big Ten basketball. That'll also be on Peacock. So
yep,
that'll help.
Quit your complaining. Anybody who complains to Peacock, take those complaints elsewhere.
Again, limited commercial interruption. I think last year they had one commercial break during the race, and that was, I think, during a yellow, to put it in perspective.
Yeah. Yep.
85 lap race. Taking a look at our race weekend preview, courtesy of Chad 200 on Twitter. 3 key stats: power, 3 wins, 2 poles, 5 podiums, 162 laps led. Last 4 finishes, though: 21st, 18th, 18th, and 15th. Last 3 races, 1 from the front row, so keep that in mind. Scott Dixon, 4 wins, 10 top 5s, 10 straight top 10s, 240 laps led. Last 3 finishes here: 1st, 2nd, and 1st. Is this the weekend Dixon gets his first win?
Well, I think you look at both of those guys. You look at Dixon and Will Power. Can one of them propel themselves to their first win of the season? You know who I'm picking, but if you were looking at one of those two guys have had previous success and winless on the season, they wouldn't be bad bets either entering the weekend. And
Will Power is still yet? Is this true? He's still yet to make yet to qualify for a Firestone Fast 6. Is that right?
I think so.
On the season, which is just absurd.
I do believe.
So I know you're picking Alex Palou. Yeah. I'm getting tired of it, to be honest.
Tired of me or tired of Alex Palou?
Yes. I'm going to go with, you got to qualify well, apparently. Now, street course races, though, the ultimate wild card. To me, Toronto is a race where something crazy is going to happen, right?
Okay.
I just expect it. I'm going to go with Joseph Newgarden.
Okay.
I'm going to go with
thinking outside the box.
Yeah, really thinking outside the box. Hey, I'm not picking Palou, so I don't think Alex
the only
Palou
guy
wins
who's won other than Alex Palou since April?
Yeah, because Barber was Scott McLaughlin, and then since it's been Alex Palou or Newgarden.
Yeah, so we're taking the 2 drivers that have only won races since April.
But I expect the unexpected in this, just because this is a race where something stupid usually happens, and that's what I think is going to happen. So as far as the green flag, 145 approximately.
Hope to see some different flavor up front, but I can't go against a guy that's won 3 straight and 4 of the last 5. He's not Max yet, but he's making the series feel more and more, at least for the championship, more and more of a formality like Formula One.
And one other thing I want to get to before we move on, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, $89 million full-scale renovation. They'll be closed November of this year until April of 2025. 7 permanent exhibits, a STEAM learning center with a racing sim, 6,700 square feet of new exhibit space, basically moving the museum into the modern era. This is very exciting. They've essentially raised just over half, $46 million of the $89 million. So 1, this is an exciting announcement. 2, best of luck raising the money to make this come to fruition.
Well, I think it's definitely going to get an influx of cash after seeing those renderings and stuff like that. It looks absolutely amazing. And I think anybody who's visited the museum in recent years appreciates the history, but also looks at it as really needing a significant upgrade and modernization and brought into the 21st century. And that's what we're going to get with this renovation. It's going to take the better part of a year and a half, 2 years. So
yeah, year and a half.
Hopefully it's open by the May of 25 is what they're projecting. So
yes,
500 month of 2025. We're really looking forward to it, opening up the basement and making that more of a thing. And just the immersive different exhibits that they're going to have is going to be pretty cool. And the STEAM element too for kids and all that. So much needed. We knew that there was a capital improvement campaign going on. We didn't know how well it was going for the Speedway Museum, but brighter days ahead for the museum. Nothing will change the footprint. Like, it's not adding any a wing or anything. Like there's no outside construction. It's all internal, and really excited to see it once it's done.
Basically, they're utilizing the basement space where they store a lot of cars, opening that up, and then they're going to move the storage of the cars off-site, and then the restoration, bays as well will go off-site, and then that area would be open for events as well. So you're just taking advantage of existing space and making it available.
Yeah, and I think too a big thing too is an endowment of sorts for them to continue to procure other cars and memorabilia and stuff like that, which is key to continuing to raise the profile of the Speedway Museum. So exciting days ahead for the museum.
All right. If you agree or disagree with us, and I'm sure you disagree with quite a bit, please let us know. You can interact with us on social media. IndyCar Podcast, the handle on Twitter, on Instagram. You can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook. Search for New Track Record. Check out the website as well. You can sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe. You won't miss an episode or any special announcements we have. You can sign up there. Also on the website, check out our store. We have t-shirts and stickers for sale. And you can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier, Rob, Stitch, and several others for their support. You can support us starting at just $1 a month. Yes, $1. That's all it takes. And as always, listen in for free on your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, so on and so forth, wherever you find your podcasts. Again, all for free. Mailbag time, Justin, and we have plenty of entries to get to this week. So we start off talking about, last week we talked about Australia, and that being a possibility is an international race. Mom2X over 2002 on Twitter says, actually like the idea of an Australian race, especially since you can't go back to Twin Ring Motegi in Japan. Yeah, that seems to be, well, the oval is off the table for now. The road course still a possibility. And then also brought up, what if they drove the Roval at Charlotte? Could be a good double header with the Truck Series. Or even NASCAR. Look, if IndyCar wants to pair themselves with NASCAR, and I feel like this experiment they've done at IMS has been a failure. Yeah. Like, I get it that IndyCar it has a race and it's an afterthought where people are showing up at the end of the IndyCar race for the Xfinity race on the Saturday, and then obviously Cup on Sunday on the road course. Well, with Cup likely moving back to the oval in 24, I'm totally okay if IndyCar wants to go out and say, hey, we'll run on a Saturday, put us under the lights or put us on Saturday afternoon and then have the Xfinity race. I'm okay with that. Just don't do it at IMS. Do it somewhere else where it's going to draw more attention. I just don't know. I think IndyCar would do it. I just don't think NASCAR would do it, especially at the Charlotte Roval. Yeah. I mean, the Charlotte Roval, though, is an interesting option to me. No, I agree. I just don't think NASCAR would be interested in having IndyCar at one of its two signature. I mean, Charlotte is very much Indianapolis in the sense that it's the epicenter of Cup in terms of where all the teams are and blah, 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 all that stuff. Yeah, I know Daytona is the biggest race, but Charlotte is really kind of the breadbasket of where Cup is established. Their Hall of Fame is right around Charlotte, isn't it? I want to say? Yes. So all of that goes into very territorial, and I just don't know if the Roval would be open for IndyCar. Not sure. We shall see. I mean, I like it as an option. Joseph Newgarden did demonstration laps there a few years ago. True. So I just don't know if NASCAR's interested. They probably aren't. This from BK Hickey, talking about Toto Wolff coming up with, I mean, the excuses these guys come up with in F1 as far as not letting Michael Andretti in are absolutely hilarious. Now saying it creates safety issues at certain tracks. They don't have the logistics for an 11th team. They had a garage for a fictional team this past weekend at Silverstone. Yes. So they could just put a regular 11th team in that garage, in that bay. Yeah, it's comical. But BK Hickey saying, pretend that Michael Andretti was already long established as an F1 team owner. One of these other now established teams wasn't yet wanted to join the fun. They still think all these points for not adding a team were valid. Oy vey this series. Yeah, look, Michael did say, look, he understands why they're saying these things. They don't want to let him in. It is all about the money. He's like, yeah, if I were in their boat, I'd probably do the same thing too. Right. But it should not be fully up to the teams to make that decision.
Yeah,
the FIA should have full power to make that decision.
I agree. But unfortunately, the teams hold a lot of power in Formula One. And I quite frankly don't blame the teams for not wanting to give up some of their money. I get it.
Now, the excuses, though, that they're coming up with are so comical.
Yeah, just say money. Just say financially.
Yes, just be honest.
Yeah, it's financial. It's 100% financial. So that's the thing.
Beyond the Flag, same thing, saying he's grasping at straws, talking about Toto Wolff every week, a new excuse. We got more on where's Alex Palou racing next year. A poll, 44% said McLaren and IndyCar, 13% McLaren F1, nearly 37% said Alpha Tauri, 6% at Chip Ganassi Racing. R. Surgat said, shock the world with his call that he's going to replace Sergio Perez at Red Bull F1. You never know. Shevchenko, Alpha Tauri, or whatever they decide to call it next year, maybe depending on how much Honda is involved. That's an interesting thing because remember, he is well liked by Honda.
True.
Ran in Super Formula in Japan. That's obviously a Honda series. He's been a Honda guy throughout his time in IndyCar. Now McLaren in IndyCar is a Chevy team. You wonder if Honda is going to try to do something to make sure he doesn't go there. Other people, as far as the news of Daniel Ricciardo replacing De Vries and what this means for Palou. A couple of replies here. Tyler_Allen saying Palou will wind up getting shuffled out back at Coin. I don't think so. De Guerra saying, as far as I understand, Ericsson has a deal with Ganassi for next year. I would guess an announcement could be made already this weekend. I'll explain why he recently bought a house in Indianapolis.
I don't know. All indications are there's no deal. But maybe
most of the teams are based in Indy. Outside of Penske in Charlotte, and Coin in Chicagoland area. Pretty much all these teams are in the Indy area.
Yeah.
So I
don't
know.
Marcus Ericsson, if he's not with Ganassi, he's going to be with somebody else.
Yeah, so he'll be with Andretti most likely. I don't think he's going to go to a lesser team than that. Chris in the 6 says, well, for Alex taking the step legitimizes Indy and more potential super license points for Pato next year.
Gotcha.
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Palou is set on super license points, but we all know Colton Herta needs to do more to earn more. I just think that's another interesting element of this whole conversation. De Guerra also saying Pruitt is in Marshall Pruitt. Meanwhile, says he'll be very surprised if Ericsson doesn't end up at Andretti or Rahal Letterman Lanigan. We'll soon find out who is right, I guess.
Yes, we will. We shall see.
De Guerra also saying, let the battle begin. 100% Swedish Quist versus one semi-Swedish Quist. Felix Rosenqvist, Tom Blomqvist. Well, the battle begins this weekend.
Man, and just imagine if we added Linus Lundqvist to the
if only
equation.
If only that were a possibility. And then Poet Shevchenko commenting on the Pratt Miller Engineering IndyCar entry. First, I thought they were coming in with a chassis. They did do the successful Chevy Aero kit after all. Another team is good, though. At what point does IndyCar start making it harder, though, for teams to enter?
I made it so easy. Now I think always new blood is better. I'm fine with it. I'm never not going to get excited when I see somebody contemplating a potential IndyCar entry. But at the same time, 27 cars is a lot of cars. You start adding HMD, you start adding Pratt Miller, and there's no decline anywhere else, then you're up against 30 or more. And that's just crazy.
And we got an email this week from Jameson King. So thanks for the email. You can always email us newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com or do it from the website. And this is talking about Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo signing a sign of opportunities for Palou. Hey gang, long-time listener, first-time messenger. Is a big fan of Alex Palou. I paid close attention to your Road America recap conversation on Palou's future. Thrilled by the bittersweet prospect that he could get a chance in F1. Just curious how you think Daniel Ricciardo's signing will impact Palou's chances of a spot at Alpha Tauri. Here's my unsolicited take. Leading contenders for that seat include F2 drivers like Lawson and Iwasa. But instead of developing a young driver that the team could use longer term, they chose to give Ricciardo a chance. Meanwhile, all eyes are now on Perez and his recent qualifying troubles. There are whispers of Ricciardo usurping the second Red Bull seat if he's as fast as his tire test suggests. I find it very unlikely that Ricciardo continues to race with Alpha Tauri, a developmental team, in 2024. All this to say, There's a good chance Alpha Tauri will save an open seat in 24, and they didn't show interest in filling it with the available F2 prospects. Is this because the driver they have their eye on is busy racing the States through the end of the year? Call me crazy. Or are they setting in motion a Palou 2024 F1 signing? Went on to say, thanks for the fantastic podcast. Hope to see you guys at a race. So first off, thanks so much for the entry, Jameson. I like a lot of the things you hit on there because I do think this is how it's playing out.
Does it make sense for Daniel Ricciardo to go to Red Bull considering he's already been there? And I know that was a while ago. What, 2017 was his last year?
I want to say 2018. I will double check that. But
yeah, I think you're right.
He went and he got the big money from Renault. It was a failure.
Yeah. Then he went to McLaren.
Went to McLaren. Did get a win, mind you. But all in all, it just the car changed and he fell off a cliff last season. So you're looking, let's see. Last year with Red Bull was 2018. His best finishes with Red Bull over the years, he had 2 third-place finishes in the championship. So,
which is really
solid.
Good. Yeah,
he's a solid driver. He can get you, a couple wins, and I think that's what they want from a number 2 driver. That's what they want.
Max is going to be the top dog. They want Daniel Ricciardo to be a good teammate, maybe get a couple wins, finish second in points would be the goal, at least with the current dominance of Red Bull, and that'd be it. But do they think that they could find somebody else that hasn't been with Red Bull, or they like the familiarity that is Daniel Ricciardo coming back? I don't know.
I think the familiarity plus having a veteran, a guy who is going to understand their role within the team.
I think that's the big thing, is know your role. Is Daniel Ricciardo ready to accept that, is what my question would be too.
I think he is, because if he can be back in a top ride, he knows that he could maybe get a race win or two and challenge for podiums. And that's probably enough for him.
I would think at this point of the career, especially when you're out of the sport for a year plus, is you probably value something like that. It's the second best seat in Formula One, is the second Red Bull seat. So whoever gets it is going to be in a great position.
And then he can ride out his career, with that seat, depending on how long he wants to race. I mean, he's not young, right? I mean, he's 34 years old, already turned 34 this year. And you're looking at a guy who's got, 3 good years left?
I mean, maybe is he a guy, let's say, hypothetically, he moves up to Red Bull, Alex Palou slots into Alpha Tauri, and then if Alex Palou performs over a couple years and Daniel Ricciardo is pushed aside or steps aside and Alex Palou steps in a big Red Bull seat, I think that'd be a perfect scenario for Alex Palou.
No, I think that's what Alex Palou is looking for. Give me a chance in a seat. I can prove myself. And look, at this point with Alpha Tauri, if you can score points, you're proving yourself. And that's all it takes. Do they have any
points this year yet?
They do.
Like 3 or 4?
It's not many. Let's see. Tsunoda has 2 10th place finishes.
That's 2 points.
2 points.
That's it. So 2 points.
Not a lot to be confident about with that team. However,
that's the thing. The expectations are low, so you don't have to do too much to impress.
No. So, I mean, you look at it that way. If you feel like you're getting equal treatment within the team now, and that's hard when the other driver is Yuki Tsunoda, who's essentially the Honda golden boy.
Right.
But, I mean, Tsunoda also has to prove himself eventually, too.
Totally. I would agree. So... makes a lot of sense for Alex Palou in that realm, but it's a challenging seat for sure.
Time to move on to news and notes and continuing with F1 and IndyCar. So Michael Andretti, we talked a little bit about him trying to get a team. No one is selling, so he went to every team to try to buy, and no one's selling because everyone said, "Well, buy a team." Well, he tried that.
Yeah,
didn't work.
Nobody's selling, so what do you want me to do?
So it's just very tricky to try to make it work. Also, this note, Red Bull will hold a demonstration show run on Lower Broadway in Nashville this year, Saturday, October 14th, with Daniel Ricciardo. So that's a couple weeks before the race at COTA in Austin.
Initially, you look at, oh my gosh, they're going to race in Nashville, take the GP away from IndyCar, but I think this is just an exhibition and a fertile ground for motorsports, considering the GP, considering how popular the NASCAR races are there. So I think it's just a natural thing. Hey, let's hype up some excitement for COTA and have this in Nashville. Now, so maybe here's the thing: is it potentially drum up excitement for an IndyCar race down Broadway, which we've talked about, and the reconfiguration of that race course is, does this demonstration help the cause of can IndyCar race down Broadway? I think we can look at that as a positive, hopefully.
In one other note I wanted to get to from our radio morning show that we do daily on radio here in Fort Wayne, but someone texting us, and it's more of a racing related thing. Slow Sports Week material for you all. Favorite race discipline, IndyCar, NASCAR, F1. Well, it's obviously IndyCar for us. Favorite interview or favorite person you've ever met in racing. So our favorite interview is Tony Kanaan, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Favorite person I've met in racing would probably be Mario Andretti.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
Favorite person that I've met in racing, probably AJ Foyt.
So, wow.
Yes. Yeah, so don't have to delve too deep.
Can you arrange an interview for new track record like a Zach Brown or Michael Andretti? We could try. I don't think that would get anywhere for that level. No, from Eric in Fort Wayne.
Michael probably a little bit easier than Zach, but we do, or you do as well as we can, particularly around May, and we've become an outlet that some have sought out for interviews, which is great. I just don't know we're at the level of messaging PR for Andretti and McLaren and going, hey, what's Zach doing next Thursday?
Yeah, we could try.
What's Michael doing? But hey, if more people keep listening, come bigger, who knows what could happen.
All right, and one other note to get to on news and notes, Roger Penske saying he'd love to see WEC at Indianapolis in the future. Austin getting the contract to host next year's U.S. round. So we thought that was a possibility, but not at this point.
Stupid COTA.
Yeah. And then Marshall Pruitt posted this. I'm hearing on a more frequent basis from IndyCar team owners and decision makers the lack of significant oval training and lights / Indy NXT has changed their views on hiring talent from the series.
I think it's a very good point because they race at what, Iowa and Gateway? Is it for Indy Next?
Yes.
No high speed. I mean, that said, there's only two anyway with Texas and Indy.
And you're not like, I get not doing Indy. I definitely get not doing Texas. You need to have ideally 20 plus cars in the field and they're close to that.
Right.
But to really make a bigger oval makes sense.
But here's the thing is who are the drivers that they're being hired instead? Alex Palou didn't do many ovals. Did he do any ovals?
No.
Who else that's coming from overseas?
Former F1 guys,
yeah,
Ericsson, Grosjean, guys in F2,
Scott McLaughlin,
Marcus Armstrong, Scott McLaughlin in supercars. Yeah.
So that seems like a convenient excuse because you're hiring people outside of Indy Next that don't have oval experience. So if it was like, hey, we're not hiring these Indy Next drivers, but we're going out and finding oval specialists and have a lot of oval experience, that'd be one thing. But there's nobody out there that has oval experience that you're hiring. So I get it that Indy Next should probably have more ovals, but at the same time, you're not racing at very many ovals anyway in IndyCar. Texas is way too big for Indy Next. You can argue Freedom 100. I get it. I think at the very least you should race at IRP. Do they race at IRP or is it the lower formulas?
No, just the lower.
I would think they should race at IRP. If they return to Milwaukee, they should race there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think Indy's the big one.
I think you need at least 3 oval races. And right now you're looking at 2 with Iowa and Gateway.
The series only goes to 4. And it's not doing it at Texas. And Roger Penske doesn't want to do it at Indy. So you're limited to where they can run anyway.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a challenge. But like you said, it is true that that's an easy excuse to make just because, you're only going to race on short ovals anyway.
Yeah.
You're not racing on bigger ovals.
So it's like, oh, we don't like any of those Indy Next guys because they don't have much oval experience. Well, who are you going to go hire? Roman Grosjean. Never been on an oval. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Marcus Ericsson.
Yeah, it's like,
Marcus Armstrong.
Felix Rosenqvist. So I don't find that argument holding much water.
Tweets of the week time, just two to get to. First from Nick Yeoman in Yeoman on Twitter. Maggots and Beckett's. Sounds like something you should probably consult a doctor about if it doesn't get any better after 24 hours. Those are corners for the British GP at Silverstone.
Yeah,
he said exactly what I was trying to formulate to say about those corners, because it does sound like a health condition.
Every corner, every straightaway has a name in Silverstone, and it's pretty cool. It's an old air base is what it was. The Wellington Strait is actually the former runway, one of the former runways. So it's pretty cool, but yeah, it's some English nomenclature for sure.
And then meanwhile, Alexander Rossi, DRS is dumb. Now he tweeted this, I'm very positive, right after Max Verstappen passed a hapless Lando Norris for the lead in the British GP because Norris couldn't defend.
Just imagine how tough F1 races would be to watch without DRS.
Yeah.
I mean,
you think it's bad now? I mean, here's the thing. If I don't like that the leader can't defend himself at all. And I think that's kind of his point.
But conversely, once you get past, then you have the advantage in that respect in DRS.
Yeah. Again, his whole point is in IndyCar, you can defend, and in F1 you cannot if you're the leader.
Yeah, I get it. I get that argument for sure with push to pass.
All right, time now for our random split air driver of the week.
All right, we're going to the late 90s of the IRL, which is always a fertile ground for random split air drivers of the week. Going with Brian Tyler of Albion, Michigan.
That's not too far from here.
Yeah, no, not very much. And was a back-to-back USAC National Sprint Cup champion for Larry Contos Racing, 96-97. He then made the jump to the IRL in 98-99. 10 starts for 3 different teams, and it was Chitwood Motorsports first, and then it was Bird Cunningham Racing, also in 1998, Team Pelfrey in 1998, and then it was Triskelly Team Racing and ISM Racing in 1999. Boy, that guy got around.
I have never heard of this guy. I have not heard of Chitwood Motorsports. Any connection to Joey Chitwood? I'm sure there is. Triskelly Team Racing? No. I've heard of ISM Racing, but he was replaced at Indy and then did not qualify between 98 and 99.
Yeah, tried twice to qualify for the 500. Didn't. He was replaced in 98 and did not qualify in 99. Top finish was 6th at the Las Vegas 500K in 1998. That was his only top 10 of his IRL career. He then raced in NASCAR in the then Busch Series in a couple races over the course of 2000 to 2005. Then got into some ARCA racing. But other than that, he was a guy that still races in USAC Silver Crown on occasion. But a guy now 55 years old from Albion, Michigan. It was 10 races, 1 top 10. That's 6th in Vegas in 1998, the crowning achievement for Brian Tyler, this week's random split era driver of the week.
So Brian Tyler, again, he took laps from Mike Groff in 98.
Yep.
On, I want to say, pole day before Groff was ready. But I don't think he got back in the car. And then in 99, did not qualify. He's not even showing up on the failed to qualify list.
He must not have not even made a run, potentially.
Perhaps. But that was it.
That's it, Mr. Brian Tyler, another random split era driver of the week that nobody's heard of.
Yeah, I've never heard of him. All right, well, next week we'll be back to recap the Honda Indy Toronto at Exhibition Place as IndyCar goes north of the border for the Peacock-only race of the season. I'm sure everyone is thrilled about. So we'll be back next week to take your complaints on that and to recap what actually happened on the track. For Justin Kitty, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.